Good afternoon. I'm David Summers. I'm the publisher of the Long Beach Post and Long Beach Business Journal. Today, we're continuing our daily live chats with leaders, talking about issues and challenges around the COVID-19 crisis impacting our community here in Long Beach. Today, we're joined by Mayor Bob Foster, former mayor of the city of Long Beach. Was mayor from 2006 to 2014, was a longtime business leader, owned a small business earlier in his career, and then went on to lead Southern California Edison before he was our mayor for 8 years. Currently, Mayor Foster is leading the Reopening Group, which is the group of citywide leaders that's tasked with looking at how we're going to safely start to reopen our economy. And so, Mayor Foster, I just want to say thank you for joining us today. And if you have questions, anyone watching there, please go ahead and send them into the comments. But I just want to ask, with an overview of the work that's been done by you and your group so far, and kind of what we can expect to happen next, Mayor.
Well, as you know, the city of Long Beach has set up an advisory committee to give advice to the city on how and when to reopen. I was asked to chair that. I'm chairing it. We've met now on 2 occasions with a group of about 23 or 24 individuals from across a broad section of Long Beach, both in terms of geography, in terms of their occupations. It's a very diverse group. I'm happy to say that it's been a very productive group as well. We turned in our initial report. This group will probably last for, I'm guessing, maybe another 6 to 7 weeks as phases of reopening start unfolding. We sent our initial report into the city on Saturday morning. I think it will be public later today. I know that the city manager has seen it, the mayor has seen it, and the city council, I believe, gets it later on this afternoon. And it's dealing with a couple of early phases, and it lays out the conditions, or at least the principles that are to be followed with a reopening. I can't give you very many details because it'd be unfair. The council has not seen it yet. I can tell you that it's the opinion of both me and the group that reopening can happen fairly quickly. Now, the city is governed by the rules of the state of California and to some extent by the county of Los Angeles. So it doesn't have complete autonomy here. But there are some things with the Governor Newsom's loosening of the stay-at-home order, I think last week. I think certain kinds of recreational activities can begin to be engaged in. That's pretty much allowed now. And we looked at low risk, low density activities that could be started fairly quickly. A couple of the principles we followed were, first of all, we urge that if you're working from home, you continue to work from home. There's no need to take that risk at this point. That the focus on bringing the economy back ought to be on people who are laid off, furloughed, or unemployed. That really should be the first priority, consistent with good medical advice. So we looked at, this virus appears to thrive in high density conditions that have duration to them when you're in proximity to somebody for a length of time. So we want to minimize those activities, and all the activities need to be accompanied with protocols that protect both the worker and the public from the virus, certainly in the initial period. So all the things you're aware of, the PPE, the personal protective equipment, sanitation, face masks, those kinds of things and social distancing, those things really need to be adhered to, particularly in the beginning.
Mayor, you talked about some of the steps and the health priorities and equipment that are going to have to come in. Obviously, looking at the big picture of all the different sectors and industries that make up our local economy, is there one particular industry that you're especially concerned about or especially focused on, and whether it be trade and commerce at the port or hospitality and conventions? What are you most concerned about in our local economy right now?
We didn't focus on a particular industry. Some of the industries you mentioned, are are going to be further down the chain of opening up. I mean, it's obviously when you bring large groups together for substantial periods of time, that's going to be difficult to do right now. But I think, and Long Beach is has a very big convention and conference sector of business, and it's critical for the city. I think everyone wants to get that open as soon as possible, but it's that has to have a great deal more study and care before you can do that. I think, as I said, we looked at the various sectors and said, instead of picking an industry like hospitality or trade, we looked at the activities and said the first things that really need to be to have our focus to open, as I mentioned, would be in the low density activities that where people are not near one another for substantial durations. So then there are a number of those, and I think we're looking at opening a lot of recreation activity. I think even small retail could be in some of the early categories. So we looked at it from a health standpoint, but also an economic standpoint. We want the economy to open. We all do. Everybody does. Sure. But you want to do it in a way that doesn't jeopardize the public and doesn't give you a great risk of a second wave of COVID. That would set everybody back.
You spoke a little bit, Mayor, about some of those early recreational activities. I understand not getting ahead of the city's discussion or that report going public, but could you weigh in a little bit more about what that might look like? Are we talking about parks or golf courses? Is it going to be the things where people can maintain distance? What will loosening of recreational activities look like?
Well, the governor came out last week and listed a whole range of activities, from hiking, jogging, bicycling, golf, but walking only, not in a golf cart, throwing a baseball. It had some very interesting activities in there, which were, David, I think one was crabbing. I assume I don't know if that's a sport, but it's certainly an outdoor activity. And tree climbing. Yeah. So you'll be happy you can climb trees now.
I do it a lot.
That is, we're able now in California, we're able to do that. Now, even then, I think the city wants to have the Department of Public Health carefully look at those activities. But I suspect those are the ones that are going to open up pretty early.
We noticed here, we were talking about it in the newsroom this morning, that table tennis, ping pong's on the list, but tennis is not. So go figure.
Yeah, there are some mystifying things to me there as well. I don't, it seems to me, I know that some people are worried about the ball, and I think there's, a couple of schools of thought on that. I'm not certain the ball is that dangerous, but I think that's the key there. On the other hand, you're handling a ping pong ball as well, so I don't know.
We're getting some questions in from viewers right now, Mayor. The Mayor Garcia spoke a little bit on Friday about the potential of phase 2 being soon, that months into weeks into days. Is Long Beach on track to be along the line, staying with what's happening with the rest of the state, or are we a bit behind? Can you give us a sense of what phase 2 might look like broadly?
That's phase 2 of the governor's proposal. So, I mean, everybody has different phases. So, first of all, I think Long Beach is prepared to open up as soon as state requirements and practicality permits. I think they are ready to do that. And I think the testing that's been done here and some of the conditions that the city has really engaged in to protect people, I think we're ready to do that. And we've been very fortunate that relative to our size, we've had a fairly low incidence of COVID cases. I think if I remember, mid 700s, I think, or something like that. That for almost 500,000 people, that's relatively low. So we have an advantage there. Now, we don't want to see that spike, but I think the city's ready to, if the state allows it, I think the city is ready to go into recreational activity and other low density activities that the state may permit. I believe the governor is going to fairly soon come out and articulate what those are and when those may happen. But I think it's it's going to be fairly soon.
We're speaking with former Long Beach Mayor Bob Foster, who is currently chairing the citywide leadership group on looking at reopening the economy. If you've got questions, please do add them into the comments. We've got about 10, 15 minutes left with Mayor Foster. Bob, I want to ask about the types of calls that you're getting. I imagine you're getting a lot of the same types of calls that I'm getting from community leaders, business leaders about, hey, we should reopen this, or we should prioritize that. And I'm wondering if there are any common themes, or if there's anything that you say to folks wanting or thinking that we should move faster in one area versus the other. How do you balance all of that lobbying that's going on?
Well, first let me be clear what this group is. I mean, the group is known as Restart Long Beach. And Restart Long Beach is not going to make any decisions. It's not going to promulgate any regulations. It's not going to say you should open this industry, but not that industry. We'll make recommendations to the city of Long Beach along those lines, but those decisions are really going to be made by the mayor and the city council in concert with the Long Beach Health Department. But we do get a lot of ideas. And look, I'm going to tell you, David, it's almost like, what you really want to do. Everybody's getting a little cabin fever. Everybody's been in the house too much. I don't know about you, but I've seen more Netflix and Amazon Prime than I have in the entire time, and I've been a member of those organizations. And I read a lot, so that's. But one of the advantages, like for a long time, I couldn't understand why golf wasn't allowed. With protocols. In other words, one to a cart, the flag doesn't get moved, you wear a mask, you don't touch anything at the golf course, you bring your own equipment. We had those rules. We have a home in the desert as well, and we had those rooms out here, and those requirements out here. Well, they opened it up out here. So, I'd be one of those people saying, why don't you open up golf? But you get people coming in saying, I don't understand why you can't open up retail. I don't understand, this business ought to be allowed. And I know the one area that I think has gotten the most attention is personal grooming or personal services. It's haircuts, it's pedicures, manicures, the massages, those kinds of things that are, as well as things like physical therapy and what have you. Those things are people really want to see open. And what I tell people is this: look, we understand the frustration. I understand the need to try to open these things. Everybody wants to do that, but we have to look at this, from a standpoint of what is going to be produced, at least in the beginning, the least risk of a second wave, and then we need to monitor that at least for a small period of time to see if anything happens, because we need to be able to respond if there's a spike. So you can't open everything up at once. You're not going to satisfy everybody. But I do think that there'll be, I think people will be fairly pleasantly happy with, by, I'd say, the latter part of this month, that there'll be a number of economic sectors open up and a lot more freedom will take place. But I want to urge everybody, look, there's nobody can police all this. Everybody's going to have to cooperate and be able to take a little bit of inconvenience and practice good hygiene, wear a mask, make sure that you carry sanitizer with you, or I go to a sanitizer station, and make sure you keep your distance. That's key to not having a second wave here. And if we all do our job, if we all do that, and don't try to cut corners and say, well, I don't care about that or what have you, then I think this will be a very smooth and fairly rapid transition to getting the economy back. In addition to that, I think we have to watch out. If you look at where the hospitalizations and deaths are occurring in far greater number, they're in the elderly category with underlying conditions. That the large portion of deaths have taken place in nursing homes or elder care homes. So we have to really watch that and see what we can do there. And quite frankly, if you're, I'm in my early 70s, and if you're in your 70s, you got to be careful, take extra precaution. If you have an underlying condition, you might want to stay in place for a little longer, because you're in a higher risk category. And so it is going to take some civic responsibility here to do this right. And so far, I have to tell you, in the places I've gone, whether it's Costco or the grocery store, people are really cooperating. I don't think I've seen anybody who has not, sanitized their hands, who has not made sure the carts were sanitized at grocery stores, who didn't wear a mask. I haven't seen anybody in the last 3 weeks that violated those rules. So keep it up, and then I think this will be a fairly benign transition to a more active economy.
Bob, we're getting a lot of questions in about resources for small business and questions about rent. I know that that's beyond what your group is working on. So I do want to give a plug to the resources like the city's economic development department, the small business development center at City College, Pacific Gateway. I've been very impressed by how many resources the city has made available for anyone wondering about how the city and our organizations are helping small business. Go check those out. But with all those questions about small business, Mayor, I'm wondering if you've got any guidance or any advice, any message for small business owners and operators having done exactly that.
Yeah, outside of having an awful lot of empathy for people that have been shut down for a couple of months who depend on that income, and believe me, I know how that is. That's very difficult. First of all, I would do what you just said. Look at the resources available at the city, county, and even the state level to be able to assist you, whether it's low interest loans or forgivable loans or whatever that is. Secondly, the first thing I would do is see if you can negotiate with your landlord. I mean, look, we're going to be in a downturn economy here for at least some period of time. Hopefully it's short. But the fact is, your landlord generally doesn't want you out of the building. I mean, first of all, at this point, there probably are not businesses lined up willing to take your place right now. So negotiate with them. I mean, they have a business too. It's their business owning that property, and they have an investment in it. But I think you can get if it were me, that's what I would do. The first thing I would do is look what's available publicly, and then I would talk to my landlord and say, look, it's likely that in the foreseeable future we're going to open up. Early in the near future we're going to open up. Let's work out a deal where I'll eventually pay the rent, but let's spread it out over time. Maybe you forgive it for 30, 60, or 90 days, or cut it in half, or whatever arrangement you can work out. Most people are pretty reasonable. And from what I've been reading, now I haven't talked to any landlords, but from what I've been reading across the country, landlords have been pretty cooperative about that because they understand the situation their businesses are in, and B, as I said, is probably not a long line of people right now looking for commercial real estate to rent.
We've got about 5 minutes left with Bob Foster, former Long Beach mayor, who is chairing the effort to look at safely starting to reopen sectors of our local economy. Bob, you talked a little bit about how much you're spending time reading lately. And early on in this crisis, you wrote an op-ed for us about leadership, one of the most read that we've had so far. And I'm wondering if you can speak a little bit about leadership in times of crisis. Who are the voices that you're listening to? Who are the knowledgeable authors that you trust right now? Where are you turning for expertise versus politics right now?
Well, first of all, let me tell you a little bit of what I think leadership means. It means a lot of things to a lot of different people. But in a time of crisis, to me, the first thing you have to be honest. You look, as I told the city council, that we're not going to get this right. No one's going to get this right. There is no template here, and even if there was, we'd still have room for error. So we have to understand that. So you have to be completely candid with people about what you're facing. And I've seen several governors, including Newsom, I think, who did a great job of saying, this is what we're facing. This is what we have to do. You have to keep reminding them what we have to do. And then it's incumbent on a leader not just to listen to one sector. And I mean this with all due respect to the medical community and medical experts. They're an important voice, but they are one voice in all of the decisions you make. So if I were back in the mayor's office, and I think Mayor Garcia does this very well, you're going to be guided by the medical community, but you're also going to listen to the faith community. You're going to listen to the economic community, to both big and small business. You're going to look at to the public sector, what's happening in the public sector. let's put it this way. I've said this before. Impoverishment, has its own health effects that are pretty serious.
Hmm.
So you have to weigh that against the likelihood of getting a second wave and of really physically hurting people. That's why I said the key here is to look at the low risk activities, start with them, and then go up the risk scale and monitor all the way along the line. But to me, I think at this point, a leader has to be knowledgeable, candid, empathetic, and imaginative, and quite frankly, don't be afraid to make a decision. I always believe that even a less than optimal decision is better than no decision. Make a decision and go with it, and change it if you have to, as circumstances change. And that's what I would look for. And I would add one thing: you also need to instill a sense of hope in people. One of the great things about trying to start opening early is it gives people a sense of hope that there's light. This is the beginning, the beginning of the end.
Yep.
You actually do see a time when we can get back to some semblance of normal. I think things will change in the future. For one, I think that all of us are going to be washing our hands a lot more. And, that has benefits. I mean, I think you'll see a lower incidence of colds and flus. We're going to be very conscious about sanitation for a long time to come. And that's a good thing. So, and look, yeah, and I would add one thing, be conscious of the impact on your fellow citizens and your neighbors. Everybody's going through a tough time right now. So be kinder, be helpful. Don't put them at risk. Take a little extra time and maybe a little extra inconvenience, and make sure you're safe, not only for yourself, but for them as well.
Wise words during a time of crisis on leadership. Mayor, the last question that I wanted to ask is you talked about this is well, we're hopeful for a quick recovery. This is going to have implications for a long time to come. I'm wondering if you can look 5-10 years down the line about things that might be different. We're about to host a great number of Olympic activities here in 2028, and we're looking at things like the impacts of the Tidelands Fund today on funding things like that. This is not going to be overnight back to normal. What does the future look like to you as we wrap up this conversation today?
Okay, well, then the first thing I'll tell you is anything I say now, I know it's going to not be on mark entirely. So I'll give you my best estimate here. I think the health effects will be with us. This virus may come back, so we have to be cautious of that. So I do think that we're going to have a long-term consciousness of keeping sanitization, of keeping your hands clean, making sure what surfaces you touch. We're going to be really sanitizing a lot more. And I can tell you, my wife and I went on a trip before this. We came back on March 3rd. And we were in Asia, and we became neurotic about cleaning our hands. There was no problem at all. We were great. It was fine. The other problem, I think, is going to be maybe even more long term, and that is that I think the fiscal condition of both the private economy and the public economy, states and local governments, the federal and state and local government, there's an enormous amount of debt. We're going to be digging out of that for a very long time. And as long as interest rates remain very low, it's probably manageable. But if interest rates really start climbing up to the level they were at maybe 20 years ago, that's an issue. For Long Beach, it's not just the Tidelands Fund, it's the budget. The budget is going to be impacted severely. We're going to have to be very creative how we deal with that. Hopefully the federal government, the state government will help out. They say they will. We'll see. I hope they do. But it's still going to be, we're going to have some self-help to deal for the next couple of years, at least, with fiscal problems. The longer-term problem of this overhang of debt, and I'm not objecting to what we did. I think it was the right thing to do. You've got to meet this economic downturn. You need to put liquidity into the economy so business can have something to fall back on, and people who are now getting under the relief program to be able to get unemployment and a special stipend on top of that. That's critical for people who are out of work. But we're going to have to pay for that. and hopefully, as I said, interest rates stay low and it's manageable. But that's going to be a problem we're going to have to deal with for a long time.
Former Long Beach Mayor Bob Foster, thank you for joining us today. We thank you for the updates about what your group is doing, looking at the slow and safe reopening of things. As you mentioned, it sounds like there's going to be a lively discussion at council tomorrow as first recommendations are coming out. And we'll certainly stay in touch and hope to talk to you again as your group continues to lead the way in the weeks ahead. Thank you for your time. All of our best to you and to Nancy and your family, and to everyone out there. Thank you for your questions, and we'll say farewell for now. And thank you for joining us.
Thank you, David. And I just want to give one shout out. The Restart Long Beach group has been an outstanding group to work with. Fabulous people, very hardworking, and I congratulate them on really sticking to the job.
Thanks very much, Mayor. Have a good afternoon.
Thank you. Yeah, you too. Take care.
Take care.
Bye-bye.